All right, and thank you so much. Welcome everyone to the Unlocking Section 3 Potential Strengthening Section 3 Compliance Through Capacity Building webinar. My name is Andalyn Nesbitt Rodriguez with ICF, and I will be your moderator for today's session. Next slide, please. Today, we're going to first have a few icebreaker questions, which will hopefully give us a sense of who's in the room and what you're most interested in hearing about as it pertains to strengthening Section 3 compliance through capacity building. Then we're going to review the purpose and background of the Section 3 program. And after that context, we're going to have a roundtable discussion with some industry leaders who have experienced success implementing the Section 3 final rule. We're going to pause throughout for questions and answers, so please input your questions as they come to you into that Q&A box so that we can ask those questions when we reach the Q&A portions of today's session. Lastly, we're going to go over a few resources at the end that we believe are going to be helpful to you as you continue to implement and administer your Section 3 program. Please know that the materials for today's session will be posted to and available on the HUD Exchange after the webinar series is complete. So with that, let's go ahead and head over to Mentimeter. This is an interactive tool that you can access via your smartphone or your computer browser. Simply open the window on your computer or your smartphone and go to menti.com. That's MENTI.com. Again, MENTI.com. You should see a screen that asks for a code, and go ahead and enter the code that's here on the screen, 48764342, to get to today's Mentimeter. And please let me know when you are logged in by hitting the thumbs up button. Then we'll know that you're ready and we can go ahead and begin with today's questions. Okay, wonderful. And I see a few people with the thumbs up already, and some folks even going ahead and answering the first question. That's wonderful. So the first question today is, what's one hobby you've always wanted to try? What's one hobby that you always wanted to try? And this is a word cloud, so the ones that are people are saying the most are going to be a little bigger. So gardening so far is kind of the biggest there. Let's see, I see kickboxing, archery, scuba diving, rock climbing. I even see fencing. So many great ones in here. Karate, dance, golf. It's wonderful. Someone said flying, and that's mine. I would love to fly a plane, but I don't even know how to get started with that. But wonderful. Okay. Thank you guys so much. Yeah, I'm gonna save this word cloud and find some cool hobbies at the end of this. Let's move on to our next question for today. In which state is your agency located? You should be able to, if you have a smartphone, just tap that smartphone, or click with your cursor if you're on your computer and yep, pin where you are in the country. This will let us know kind of just where everybody's located. And it looks like we have a really great mix spread out all over the country. This is fabulous. I see someone in South Carolina. I'm in South Carolina as well. Let's see here. Wonderful. Really good to see the demographics of who's in the room, what HUD regions are represented. And oh yeah, lots of folks in Texas, lots in California. Wonderful. All right. I'm just going to give it a couple more seconds just in case anyone else. Still seeing a few more bubbles. All right. Thank y'all so much. That's really great information. Good to know. So we have a mixture of lots of different geographic locations in the room. Fabulous. All right, let's move on to the next question. What are you most interested in learning today? This is not a word cloud. You have a little bit more room to write. We really want to know what you're interested in learning. We think we've put together a really great session for you, and this might help us just throw a few more things in there if we see something that maybe we didn't cover. Ensuring compliance, Section 3 basics. Okay. Um, Compliance, best practices, absolutely. That's what we're trying to get to here. Um, okay, how to get other staff and contractors on board. That is fabulous, and I think we will answer that for you today. Um, Let's see here. Wonderful. How to get contractors to play along with compliance. How to determine when Section 3 applies. Okay. Anything valuable. Okay, wonderful. Well, we look forward to providing lots of great information and resources at the end that hopefully will help as well. So, okay, let's move on to our final question here in Mentimeter for today. And how do you feel about your organization's capacity to implement Section 3? This is, anonymous, so you can definitely be honest here. Are you confident? Do you really, we have a good foundation, could just use a little extra support. Maybe you're neutral. We're still assessing and trying to figure that out. Or maybe you're a little bit concerned. We have some gaps that need to be addressed, and we're here to figure out how to address those. All right. Looks like lots of people are still assessing their capacity, and that's great because this is what this session is about, is strengthening that capacity. Um, Wonderful. All right. Thank you all. Thank you for participating. This is really great information, great for us to know. And we are going to move right along now and dive a little bit into the purpose of Section 3. Section 3 is a provision of the Housing and Urban Development Act of 1968. The purpose is to ensure that employment and other economic opportunities generated by certain HUD financial assistance shall, to the greatest extent feasible consistent with existing state, federal, and local laws. And regulations be directed towards low and very low income persons, particularly those who are recipients of government assistance for housing, and to business concerns which provide economic opportunities to low and very low income people. So that's kind of the overall purpose of Section 3. Every year, HUD invests billions of federal dollars into distressed communities across the country for projects that build and rehab housing, improve infrastructure, and help families achieve stability and advancement. And one way that HUD achieves those goals is through Section 3. So Section 3 is to help keep HUD dollars local and foster local economic development, neighborhood economic improvement, and individual self-sufficiency. So that's kind of why we're in the room. That's the purpose of Section 3. And so with that in mind, there were a number of changes. Sorry, next slide. There were a number of changes to the Section 3 requirements with the issuance of the Section 3 final rule. And one of those changes was the introduction of quantitative benchmarks that were established. So in order for a HUD grantee to be in compliance with Section 3, they must meet the quantitative benchmarks and follow the prioritization of effort, which I'm going to detail on the next slide. But the quantitative benchmarks include 25% of all labor hours being performed must be performed by Section 3 workers, and 5% of all labor hours being performed by targeted Section 3 workers. Okay, now whether those labor hours are specific to a project or to like a year depends on whether those funds, the HUD funds, came from the Housing Community Development Office or the Public and Indian Housing Office of HUD. So there are resources on the HUD Exchange, lots of previous webinars that can give you more guidance on that. But in general, these quantitative benchmarks are the 25% of labor hours being performed by Section 3 workers and also 5% of the labor hours being performed by targeted Section 3 workers. Now, a moment ago, I talked about the prioritization of effort, right? So to be in compliance, you have to meet those quantitative benchmarks, and by in doing so, following the prioritization of efforts. So that means to the greatest extent feasible and consistent with existing federal, state, and local laws and regulations. Recipients of HUD funding shall ensure that contracting opportunities, as well as employment and training opportunities that arise in connection with Section 3 projects, are provided to those Section 3 business concerns and to Section 3 workers within a certain order of priority. So again, the order of priority is different depending on whether the HUD funding comes from the HCD side or the PIH side of HUD, offices of HUD. So please refer to those prior Section 3 trainings on the HUD Exchange for more guidance there. Lastly, I want to mention, just for context around Section 3, the qualitative efforts. So next slide, please. If a recipient cannot meet the quantitative benchmarks within the prioritization of effort, the recipient can provide evidence of qualitative efforts to assist low and very low income persons with employment and training opportunities. And these can include providing training or apprenticeship opportunities, providing or connecting Section 3 workers with assistance in seeking employment. That could include uh, drafting resumes, preparing for interviews, finding job opportunities. All of those things are examples of qualitative efforts that can still bring a HUD grantee into compliance if you've tried to meet those quantitative efforts, you've tried to follow the prioritization of effort, and were unable to. So that is an overview of the new Section 3 rule. And with that context, we're going to dive right in. If you'll take me to the next slide, please. We're going to go right into our panel discussion. Next slide. So I'd like to welcome our panelists for today. We have with us Laura Lind. Laura is a home program grant specialist with the Idaho Housing and Finance Association. Laura is responsible for administration of the Home ARP, NSP, and HTF programs, along with internal software administration. Laura provides technical assistance, quality assurance, regulatory guidance, and training for internal staff and external partners. Laura has been the point person on Section 3 and has been instrumental in establishing the formal procedures, forms for the developers to use on projects, establishing the full section on the IHFA website, which is phenomenal. We will share that resource at the end, and reference materials for Section 3. Laura is also responsible for submitting various reports to HUD annually, like the CON plan and the analysis of impediments to fair housing choice. Um, we also have Patricia Ford. Patricia is the program manager for Section 3 for the City of Detroit's Housing and Revitalization Department. Patricia developed the Section 3 program for her agency in 2017 after having previously revamped the Detroit Business Certification Program under a different department. Patricia worked quickly with the publication of the new Section 3 rule to update the city's Section 3 program. Patricia's goal is to develop the Section 3 program in a way that the program is easy to understand and has a positive impact on each project that it touches. And we also have Heidi McCall with us. So Heidi is the Resident Opportunity Self-Sufficiency Service Coordinator. So that's Ross Coordinator with Twin Falls Housing Authority. Heidi began working at the Twin Falls Housing Authority when the agency kicked off that Ross program. So she's been with that since the inception as a new grant recipient as of June 2022. So she's going to provide valuable insight around Section 3 and the Ross program. So Heidi, Patricia, Laura, thank you all for being here and welcome. Thank you for joining us today. If we could, yep, very good. We'll dive right into the first question of this panel discussion. How did your organization identify available resources within your organization and community to achieve Section 3 goals? After our panelists' responses to this question, we're going to pause for Q&A. So again, remember to put those questions into the chat box, and we'll make sure that we get those questions out to the panelists. So let's begin first with Laura, then Patricia, then Heidi. Laura?
Yeah. When we first looked at the new rule, we took an understanding that our greatest resource is really our partners. These are the people that are on the ground doing the work. Those are developers, general contractors. They're working with subcontractors to really, be on the ground and make this stuff happen. They're also the front line for collecting required paperwork. So the first question was, what kind of paperwork do we need to be compliant with this? And so we identified the need for documentation, how to collect labor hours, contractor developer certifications, um, you know, setting procurement standards so that our partners knew what we expected from them up front. So identifying what's changed in from the old rule to the new rule, and then kind of looking through those processes that we've been going through, before, and then how's that going to change to now, and getting them training. I think that's been really the key thing for us too, was understanding that um, they might do one project every couple of years with us, depending on, how active they are with our programs. And so oftentimes they would come to us and go, well, I don't know what Section 3 is. So starting from that kind of place and then bringing them forward so that they can be successful with this. This is really our big goal over at IHFA.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Next up, Patricia.
Yes, thank you. Good afternoon and good morning to those on the West Coast. Um, Adjusting to the new rule, it helped me to adjust to the new rule when the new rule was published. We kind of just completed a process and procedures of the old rule. But we had to, as everyone know, we had that transition period to adjust from the old rule to the new rule. So what we did was we took the documents, we had a policy, we developed some forms and documents, because what we wanted to do was we needed a way to help our stakeholders in order for them to help us. So for us to adjust to the new rule, we started something called Section 3 orientation. And the Section 3 orientation was to introduce the new rule, the changes from old to new, because it was a change for a lot of our stakeholders, our developers, our sub-recipients, and our developers. So we wanted to make sure they understood the new rule, and we wanted them to also share with us what do they need from us in order for, as a grantee, for us to help them in order for them to help us, if you will. So we actually required some documents up front, because the Section 3 orientation meeting that we started, this meeting was held when projects were in, if you will, in formation still. We probably first granted them some funding, and it probably was a conditional funding. So we wanted to be upfront with them to say, hey, these are the requirements you need to give us. This is the documentation. So we developed like a couple of documents that were required, and they had to submit these documents part of their NOFA or the RFE packages. So we really wanted to lean on our stakeholders, our external stakeholders, to help them. So then we needed, like, what kind of documents do we need? So we kind of developed a document for the labor hours in the beginning. It was kind of based on the old form, the 6002 form. And so we wanted a user-friendly form to help our contractors to submit documentation to us. So even though our contracts were with the developers, we really leaned on those general contractors as our single point of contact, because they are the ones day-to-day interacting with the subcontractors. So we developed that, and one of the documents that, as you can see on the screen, what if we didn't meet those hours, those minimum hours that were set by HUD? So we wanted to make sure we were early enough in the process to make sure we can have those safe harbor benchmarks met at the same time, just in case those hours were not met for Section 3 workers and targeted Section 3 workers. So that's kind of how, like, a really high level overview on how we adjusted and identified resources from the old rule to the new rule. And I'd like to pass it on to Heidi.
Hi. So for our small agency, once the final rule came out, everything just felt very overwhelming. And for our, again, rural and small agency, most of the trainings that were attended felt very geared towards large agencies and agencies that had staff specifically dedicated to work on Section 3. It's already really hard for us to find contractors, let alone adding in more complexity, just made complying with Section 3 with the quantitative measures impossible. And so our state head office let us know that there was a grant for technical assistance, and they helped us apply for that grant, which we received. We then worked with ICF over a series of 4 to 5 meetings to determine what was required of our small agency. We were able to clarify that because we had 250 units or less, that we only had to meet qualitative or best effort. So Andalyn, back to you.
Thank you so much. That is really, really great to know. I'm going to start with you, Heidi, since you since you were
Okay.
just speaking.
Right.
About kind of the small PHAs, because you had 250 or fewer units, you are able to just do the qualitative efforts. Have you identified any of those qualitative efforts that that you are considering at this time?
Well, yes. And so I think well, um, so yes, we have done several different things. We have done just small efforts by well, I know we were scheduled to talk about that a little later on, but just small things by putting things in our newsletters, putting things in, posting information up in our lobby.
Perfect. Perfect. Thank you. And we got a question here. What does Heidi mean when she says 200 or fewer units? I know this is a quick question, but
200 and fewer units, 250 units or less, excuse me.
and by that you mean housing
So
units.
yes, housing units.
Perfect. Thank you. All right, we've got lots of great questions coming in. Thank you guys so much. I'm going to move on to a question for Patricia now. You mentioned that you had this orientation, and so was the orientation for developers, and you met with developers, and then put the developers had the responsibility of getting contractors to provide the right information? Is that the way that was handled?
So with our Section 3 orientation meeting, it actually was a meeting where we met with the developer and their general contractor, because we needed both parties to understand they both are responsible with the requirements that's going to be asked of them. So when we met with them, when we meet with them, and they were already awarded some type of funding, and they may be still going through their capital stack and pulling the numbers together for their projects. So we wanted to meet early enough because we want to make sure they can get some of that qualitative opportunities performed. So this meeting early on, and we don't do some of it now because some of our general contractors are repeat contractors for some of our projects. So we gave them, like what you did at the beginning of this meeting, the overview of the new rule. And then we kind of broke down of why are we meeting so early, because we wanted them to really make that that greatest extent possible effort of outreach. Like you just mentioned to Heidi, what are some of those efforts? Like, besides us including Section 3 language in all of our contracts, posting at job sites, participating with community groups with job fairs, if there's an opportunity for job fairs, helping, reaching out to organizations that's around the project. If they have opportunities, if they're having job fairs to help with resume building, those are some of the things we do in this Section 3 orientation meeting, knowing that we still push for meeting those labor hours. But if we don't meet both of those benchmarks, we have something to say we actually made that effort of those qualitative efforts of outreach.
Awesome. Makes sense. Thank you so much. Laura, question for you. How important was it to your organization that you got developers on board with the new rule?
I think that was the most important part. Like I said, the developers are right there on the ground doing this, and as Patricia said, they're responsible for getting us the paperwork that, that they followed their developer plan, that they did the efforts to do outreach, that they went out and did bid procurement to make every effort to find Section 3 business concern, organizations, or even go out and hire Section 3 workers, as possible. So it's really the the relationship with the partners up front and getting them the training so that they know what to do and what's required was really the biggest part.
Thank you so much. I have one more question that came in for Patricia. Do you meet with developers and general contractors project by project, or was it a larger meeting and training with all developers and contractors that kind of registered or came in through your NOFA process?
Actually, we meet project by project for each developer and each general contractor. But we are thinking about doing a overall training and posting it on our website. But right now we are meeting project by project.
Wonderful. Okay, thank you so much. Well, I have one more question, and then we'll move on. There's really great questions coming in. Thank you guys. Keep them coming. Um, I'm going to ask this one question, and then we will move to the next. If a partner does not meet the benchmark, do you require proof of efforts made to reach the benchmark before final payment, or do you check for those efforts during monitoring? Also, are there checkpoints along the way to determine if a benchmark is going to be met? And Patricia, I'll ask you to answer first. And then if anybody else on the panel has anything to add, please do.
Actually, all of the above. We highly encourage our projects to do outreach efforts prior to starting construction, but there may also be opportunities throughout the life of that construction, because a lot of our projects, larger projects, may be 12 months to 24 months. So as they perform those outreach efforts, they do have to show verification that the outreach effort has been performed. So we receive documentation that those efforts are made along the way. We don't wait until the end of the project. And we try to have them submit, not try, but we have them submit monthly labor hour reports. And it's kind of hard to say if they're going to meet the benchmark efforts by the end of the project, because it depends on each stage of the project. It's different contractors that are on board throughout the life of the project. But of course, we know at the end, and hopefully we will have all the documentation by that point of any outreach efforts that have been performed.
So kind of monitoring along and along.
Yes.
And trying to land the plane.
Yes.
Anyone else on the panel have anything to add there?
I guess I can add, Idaho also starts at the beginning. Outreach is not something that you can recreate once the project is built. So it's, stressed very early on that as you're starting your site, that you're reaching out to the local community. And Idaho is very rural, so that can be a very big distance if you're looking for, enough population to meet those requirements. So start early, identify upfront if we have any Section 8 housing locally, where you're going to post. And we have in our developer plan, we require upfront that they notify us what they plan to do, that we have an agreement up front, and we collect that paperwork early and often. So again, just like Patricia said, when they come in for a draw, we ask for where's those monthly labor hour sheets? Do they kind of line up with what they just requested for repayment? There's a lot of back and forth that can happen on that. And you do not want to be trying to chase down a contractor 8 months after they were on the job site to try and get paperwork from them. So get it, up front or right when they're doing that and requesting payment.
Oh, I like the language early and often. Early and often. All right. Let's move forward to question 2. Thank you all for that, and we're going to move forward to question 2. In what ways have internal resources helped enhance your organization's capacity to achieve Section 3 goals? We're going to go back to our panel, starting with Laura, then Patricia, then Heidi.
Yeah, what we did was we developed the forms to collect all the required information and certifications. So again, we send those out to our developers. We have pre-construction calls. We tell them this is what's required, and we make sure we collect all of that up front and along the way. We I have a website where we list all of our, administrative planning documents and all of our other programmatic kind of information. And so along with that, we created a new site for Section 3 specifically so that it could be a landing page for any contractor to go and look, find the forms quickly. If they wanted HUD resources, they're along the way, HUD's developed more training opportunities or information. And so giving those links to contractors and developers who don't normally go hunting on HUD Exchange or HUD.gov looking for this kind of stuff, giving them those tools early on in a place that they could go reliably to find that link was really big for us. We also, the last point there is staff challenges. We're the balance of state for Home and Housing Trust Fund, and in a very large rural state. And so our staff was very limited as far as, what we could do. And so again, streamlining the process and making the tools available so that our partners who are primarily doing a lot of the work can get us what we need so that we don't have to spend significant amount of our time troubleshooting. I think that was the big part of this was as long as we provide enough training and we work with them on what we expect and we're collecting outreach along the way, then it's not something that's going to take a couple people on our staff weeks of time to review. And that's really what we had to kind of do to make up for the challenges in our staff capacity on this.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Patricia?
Yes. So for us, the city of Detroit, we are considered a large grantee. And to me, in my opinion, no matter the size of the, as a grantee, small, medium, or large, Section 3 can be a challenge. For us, we do have a division called labor compliance. And our labor compliance consists of 2 teams. we have a Section 3 team and a Davis-Bacon team. And some of you may be doing both Section 3 and Davis-Bacon. We are separated. When I first started, I was a team of one, and now I do have a team member. However, I just wanted to let you know is that even though we do it separate, and you're probably like, wow, is that right now we do have over 20 active projects. When I say active, they are in the middle of construction projects. We have a few that just or are about to end construction. And we also have what I call coming up next, meaning that we have met with these projects for our Section 3 orientation meeting, even though construction have not started yet, but we have met with these projects because they're on deck, you know, close to starting construction. And we have over 13 of those projects about to start. And then we have over 30 projects that's in the planning stage, potential projects in the planning stage. So I was saying that to say, even though we have two separate teams, we have so many projects. So we still have an issue with capacity. Also within our department, which is called Housing and Revitalization Department, we have teams that do housing underwriting. They do all of our multifamily projects. And then we also have a team that do PFRs, which we call public facility rehab. We have single family. We have our lead team. Some of you probably recently, like the city of Detroit, we have DRGR projects coming up, disaster recovery projects. On top of, we have our choice neighborhoods, the ARPA. So all these projects, except for our ARPA projects, trigger Section 3. So we still have capacity issues, even though that's what we do, that's the Section 3 portion. And I just wanted to share that the number of projects where just because we have a separate team, we still have a lot of funding that we still have to meet timeliness on a lot of these projects. So what we were able to do for internal resources is where it says upfront, that I was able to, when I first started doing Section 3, to understand our department and understanding Section 3 at the same time, is that we need Section 3 upfront. Like others have mentioned, is that we include required Section 3 documents in our NOFAs, PFRs. In our NOFAs, our Section 3 documents are scored, they're required. And then throughout the life of the project, once we get started, there's Section 3 documents that's required monthly. And when it's time for a draw, Section 3 is part of that sign-off process, as along with our Davis-Bacon teams. If we feel as though we don't have current paperwork, or if we feel as though we aren't getting responses from our projects, our developer and our general contractors, we can hold up payments, because we don't want to wait to gather a lot of that documentation at the end of the project. So we remember each one of us are in control of what we receive for Section 3. And since we are part of that draw sign-off process, we can hold payments until we feel as though we got enough documentation to sign off on that draw package for that project. So again, we just try to work with each project. We also do TA sessions throughout the life of the project. You may have a person who's new to Section 3 or who's new to all of this. We do meet with teams throughout the project if they have any questions. Along with our Davis-Bacon team, we do review payrolls. We sign off on those payrolls. Section 3, we looking at the hours. Davis-Bacon is looking at the wages. So that's how we are able to combine our resources or some of that documentation between our two teams under labor compliance, again, our Davis-Bacon and our Section 3 teams. But the big thing is, as long as we have all our teams internally on the same page and pushing Section 3, it makes our life a little easier, even though it's still a challenge. And the last thing is that just to let you know, we do have a Detroit Housing Commission, but that's totally separate from my department. So we have a housing commission and we have what we do with the city of Detroit. So I kind of just wanted to let you all know that some of you are doing your housing commission is part of city government. And I would like to pass it on to Heidi.
So we really utilize our staff as to help us with Section 3. So one of the things that we feel is a perfect fit is the Ross program, or maybe those of you that have an FSS program. We're already working with residents that are interested in goal setting or interested in employment. So that sort of just makes an easy way to bring Section 3 up and inform residents about that. We also created a shared database, so like a spreadsheet on a shared drive that is accessible by every employee, where we can all go in and track residents that we've spoken to either on the phone or via email or face-to-face that have expressed interest in Section 3. And so we just have a central location where any of us can track that information and then have it readily available if a contractor expresses, hey, that they're hiring. We've got a list already made. So, Andlin.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And I'm gonna stay on you, Heidi, just for a minute. 'Cause I want
Okay.
to talk about that document that you just talked about. That spreadsheet that all employees can access seems really great, particularly for a smaller PHA with maybe less resources than Detroit or a New York. Or is that like a Google Doc? Not to be endorsing any particular, but how does that work exactly? Is it on your team site or?
No, not everyone uses Teams at our agency. It's just small. Only a few of us use that. So we just have a shared drive, an employee drive, and then we just have a file and then an Excel sheet. Just simple, nothing fancy, just basic, simple Excel sheet. That's it.
Wonderful.
And then we can track names and contact information when they say, hey, yeah, I'm interested.
Great, great. Staying on you for just another minute.
Okay.
Someone asked, with all of the talk about the 150 units, they're confused. What if a project stands alone as one unit? There's a project that they're doing that's completely lead ridden, very expensive project. Does Section 3 requirements pertain? So I just wanted to clarify that for a moment. What you meant by 250 fewer units.
Well, I would have to refer that question to someone else because
Okay.
that's just the information that was shared with me was that it was the
Absolutely.
250 limit or 250 unit like cap for our
Absolutely.
definition or whatever.
I can clarify. I'm happy to clarify that. So, under the new Section 3 rule, if a PHA has fewer than 250 housing units, then they're considered a small PHA, and they should try to meet the spirit of Section 3, should try to meet those quantitative benchmarks and the prioritization of effort. But if they can't, they're okay to just do the qualitative efforts because they're a smaller PHA, and HUD acknowledges that there might be fewer resources there. So that's what we meant by 250 units. That is a designation that you get from HUD as a small PHA that kind of alleviates some of the more stringent Section 3 requirements if you are designated as a smaller PHA. So it doesn't have anything to do with particular projects or whether that project triggers Section 3. It sounds like in answer to this question, if it's a lead Healthy Homes project and more than $100,000 of lead healthy homes grant was spent, or if more than $200,000 of HCD funds were spent, or if any amount of public housing funds were spent and they were spent out of particular buckets, the triggering requirements around Section 3 remain the same and would be triggered based on those particular requirements. So just wanted to clarify that. I also want to take just a moment to make another statement. I think that some questions may be coming into the chat box as opposed to the Q&A box. I can see them kind of coming up for a moment and then going away. I can't see them and read them unless they come into the Q&A box, not the chat box. So please do click the 3 buttons at the bottom. On my screen, it's the bottom right, and go to the Q&A box, not the chat box, because we do want to get everybody's questions. Okay, Heidi, thank you so much. Wonderful information. I'm going to circle back now to Patricia. Do you require, you spoke a little bit about getting the, I believe, getting a list of employees and things you do with the developer and the contractor and meeting with the developer and the contractor ahead of time. Do you require a list of all employees and their Section 3 status prior to award to kind of gauge how many folks may be Section 3 or targeted Section 3 workers? And kind of a second part of this question, do you do any further vetting of workers who are certified as Section 3 or targeted Section 3, or do you take the word of the contractor and the developer
Yes.
when they make the
Uh,
certifications?
we don't require like the general contractor and all the subs to give us a list of all their employees that may be considered Section 3 or not. And that's something, honestly, that we are considering to improve on our process for that portion. But what we do do a little more than just taking the word of if someone's Section 3. So we actually have a one-pager that if someone's considered Section 3 within any of the contractors, is that we have them complete this one-pager. We don't ask them, by law, we don't ask them their specific salary, but we give them the chart, what the salaries are, for that year, since it changes every year. And we have like 4 questions. Yes, no, yes, no. And if they answer yes to a few of these questions that they are Section 3, then one thing we do ask for is a copy of their ID, front and back, because that may depend on if they're targeted or not. Because, Section 3 can live anywhere, but the targeted has to be within that neighborhood, that service area. And if you need to expand that service area, depending on where the project is, we do that. But we do ask for documentation to do a little bit more of verification if that individual is Section 3. But also, we have been encouraging a lot of our general contractors and our subcontractors that you may have someone on staff that is Section 3. So now we're trying to improve our capacity on helping these contractors to see if they have any employees on staff, because if they hired someone recently, even before they were on this project, they may have met Section 3 at the time of hire. So we're trying to now encourage businesses to really look at their staff on their project. So we're actually working on improving our process.
And if you're wondering what Patricia meant by that time of hire, there is a 5-year look back period with HUD. Once we get 5 years out, the HUD new rule it hasn't been published for a full 5 years. But again, we're going to point you towards the resources on the HUD Exchange to get more information about that and general Section 3 information. So thank you so much. I have another question for you right now, Patricia. Can you provide one key area of focus for organizations that may have smaller capacity that they could start with when trying to unpack the new rule and figure out implementation? Was there a particular resource that you could think of that was really helpful for you as you were getting your brain around it?
Um, not not really. I don't have really just one, but I guess I can start off with when at the very beginning, if you can start way before pre-construction, when everyone has their pre-construction, pre-performance meetings, like um, Heidi mentioned also, or was it Laura? Well, I forget which one mentioned it's too late then. So our Section 3 plan, what we decided to do is that's one of our required documents, but we also list opportunities. So we give them suggestions on outreach efforts. We just don't leave it wide open, even though they may have some ideas we haven't had. But that is so important. If you can really get them on board in the beginning for those outreach efforts, that would help you to meet this safe harbor qualitative portion if you don't get those hours. And remember, we have to meet both of the benchmarks set by HUD for Section 3 workers and targeted Section 3 workers. So I guess the one takeaway, if you can really get started at the very beginning when that project is in formation.
Fabulous. Thank you so much. Laura, question for you. What is one key component of the Section 3 developer plan that is crucial to helping your organization meet its goals and document compliance?
Well, I would say identifying their outreach efforts, and they're going to also identify what method of procurement they're going to go through, depending on the size of the project and all of that. I think that the developer plan up front is the biggest part, is making them work through how they're going to be compliant from the get-go. And so identifying that outreach early, where they're going to go and do that outreach. So, what the mile radius is going to be looking like for that project, depending on where that's located. How they're going to solicit smaller businesses or different contractors to come in. Um, that's really the biggest part of the developer plan in general. Um, just think through the process early.
Again, early and often. So meeting with them early and establishing how exactly are you going to do this really helps you and them get on the same page and helps you to see at what points you can come in and kind of monitor along the way, that often piece, because you see what they say they're going to do and you're following them and tracking them to make sure that that kind of was working out.
I think if you can do that, then you know what documentation to ask for. Because if they say that they're going to go to job fairs, I, you know, I think in the trainings that I gave with them, I told them, take a photo. If you've got something on your job site that, is soliciting people to come to somewhere or call somewhere to apply for a job, if you're putting up flyers in housing, looking for workers or whatnot, take a photo of it. Because giving me a printed, a Word document that says, yeah, this is what we put somewhere, is not the same thing as taking a photo of the job site with the big piece of paper there saying, here it is, proof and evidence that we actually did do this.
Yeah.
And that's what we're looking for.
Absolutely. Hopefully a laminated copy with the photo. All right. Heidi, one last question for you, and then we will wrap this up. Can you talk about how local government or state organizations receiving HUD assistance can begin to collaborate with ROS and FSS programs to let PHA residents know about Section 3 employment and training opportunities?
Well, I know at our housing authority, I help coordinate educational presentations. So that's always, or that's one way, I guess, with us that they would be able to share information. They could just coordinate with me and reserve our community room and come in and give presentations to try to connect with residents that are interested.
Beautiful. Perfect. Thank you so much. All right. Thank you all so much for your work on the panel. I know it's rigorous. We're going to move forward now, and we're actually going to take a quick break. It is 1:56 p.m. here on the East Coast. So let's take a 5-minute break, and then we'll come back and jump right back in. We'll meet back here at 2:01 p.m. Eastern Time. All right, everybody, welcome back. It's 2:01. I hope everybody had a good quick break. Um, we are going to continue now with our panel discussion. But before we do that, I do want to say that note that we're noticing a lot of really technical kind of Section 3 specific questions in the chat. This webinar is really about capacity building, and our panelists are here to discuss kind of what they've done with capacity building. So we're going to try to answer all of the questions in the chat, but Tiara is going to put in the chat, one of my colleagues is going to put in the chat now the link to the HUD Exchange page on the Section 3 page on the HUD Exchange. There are webinars in there. There are office hours, lots of really great information to get those Section 3 specific questions answered. So please do keep the questions coming, particularly if they're around capacity building, and we will try to get everything answered for you. So if we can move forward now, we will go right into our third question for the panel. And welcome back, panelists. Thank you all. So our next question here is, in your view, this question is actually I'm going to focus this one on Laura. Laura, in your view, how do comprehensive Section 3 plans, policies, and procedures support the achievement of Section 3 goals? And this is kind of a two-part question. So how do those plans, policies, and procedures support the achievement of Section 3 goals? And which specific aspects of your plans, policies, and procedures improve the effectiveness of your Section 3 efforts?
Sure. Again, as you heard us drill on, the most important part of Section 3 is starting the process early, identifying how we can help our partners be successful and what we need documentation-wise from them. So at the time of the NOFA, we have a minimum threshold requirement that they will include a developer plan telling us what they plan to do as part of the project before they get funding on anything. And, how are they going to be compliant? And then having pre-construction calls with them early on to kind of go over the tools that we've developed. So I think it's important to note that one of the tools that we also provide to our partners is a method for contractors, subcontractors to um, calculate out the income of their employees and then self-certify for their employees whether or not their Section 3 were targeted based on the information that they have. We do not, IHFA does not collect, individual workers' personal information. And so one of the provisions in Section 3, it said self-certification. And so we allow our contractors to do that work. They know their employees, they have all of that information. They can certify, get us the paperwork early about what that's going to look like, and make our job is just to make those tools available. And that is really kind of the heart of plans, policies, and procedures is helping our partners identify early what we want, giving them the tools to be successful, identifying how often they're going to be providing us that information. A lot of the questions that I've gotten along the way have been, you know, how do we make this easier? Or they're new to Section 3 entirely, and they don't know what it even means, especially in some of the smaller communities. We do some single family construction, and when you go in to do one home or just a couple in a smaller community, you might be working with people who have no idea what that is. They've never heard of low, AMI for income qualification on Section 3. And so giving them forms and saying, here's exactly where you need to go to find that information for your area. These are your workers, you tell us that back, and just make it as simple as possible on them and us when we have to collect that paperwork at the varying stages. And our internal staff understanding what they need to do in order to work with their partners is also part of that, having internal policies and procedures as well, so that, you know, they're understanding what they need to be communicating to our partners.
Wonderful, thank you. And you mentioned a couple of forms, and I know, again, we're going to put your the link to your website in at the end under resources because you have phenomenal forms. But you have a form that will help the contractors kind of figure out the income for workers. Um, and so then they kind of pass that information on to the developer and on to you. And that's kind of the process and the way that works.
So the contractors, whether it's the sub, the general, you know, anyone who's collecting labor hours, they need to verify their staffs. Um, so they need to certify in their own records whether somebody on their staff that's going to be charging time to a project is or is not Section 3 or targeted Section 3. And then we provide them, the contractors, a labor hour certification form where they can fill that out as often as they want, whether that's a weekly, monthly, you know, along with their request for repayment. Um, they fill out that form and certify that those hours are true, whether they are or not Section 3 worker hours included on there. So they self-certify that, they turn that over to the developer. Our developers are then kind of bringing all of that together for IHFA. And we also have a spreadsheet out there where we have the developers actually bring all of the draw or the weekly or monthly information on labor hours together. We don't, again, ask for necessarily the names of the employees, but um, we do ask for like employee number or whatever so that we can track it's the same person along the way. And that kind of, again, puts that ability for the subcontractor, the contractor, they can manage the verification. I'll take them at their certification on all of the information, and then they pass that on to us. So on a, like, let's say on a draw, if we're going to get them monthly, they're going to turn in the draw for what they want reimbursed for. Here's the list of all of the contractors that worked, you know, who are looking for reimbursement. And then here's all of the contractor certified labor hours in the forms that we provide. And, you know, we also on the form, we have it identified for area median income. So like, let's say, for instance, and try not to go too much in the weeds, but let's say we're doing a project in southeast Idaho, and they have workers coming in from Salt Lake, which could happen. You know, helping our contractors understand that you're looking at the area median income for where the actual worker lives. And so they could be turning in lots of different forms depending on where, you know, they live, the change in area median income for that individual. That can make it really complicated, but I think if you fill out and you calculate whether or not they are Section 3 targeted Section 3 upfront, and then you know, as a contractor, you have that information, then you're really just looking for payroll and filling out the forms, and that can streamline as long as you know what's expected. And that's really the heart of all of it.
Exactly. So you know you've got this developer plan and you're meeting early and you're figuring out everything and then you've really streamlined this. So I see a question that came in and it kind of mimics a couple of other questions that I've seen throughout the chat. So I won't read it directly, but basically um, expressing that some contractors may be frustrated with having to deal with these additional rules and regulations. And so my question for you is, did you find that implementing the developer plan and particularly these particular forms that you have on your website, and the answer may be no, but was there a time that before you had all of that, that you were dealing with contractors? Was there a time before you had that you were trying to kind of implement the new rule, but you didn't have all of that already ironed out? And if so, how did having the developer plan and the forms on the website and being able to point them to everything kind of smooth out those wrinkles, if at all? Did that make contractors more at ease and able to do the projects?
You know, that first year, I'll call it the wild, wild west because we were doing our best. There wasn't a whole lot of HUD guidance going on at that time. We still had the opportunity portal back then, and so trying to educate, I think it was the biggest key for that first year. Educating ourselves on what we needed, educating our partners on how to be compliant, the kind of paperwork. And yeah, we still bump into issues specifically with smaller contractors who, you know, for anyone out there, Idaho has been booming when it comes to construction work and housing. And so convincing somebody who can go anywhere else for work and not have to deal with that paperwork to come and do the work on low income housing and to take that on, that's been the challenge. And convincing them that they not only want to do the kind of work that we're all out there trying to do for our communities, um, but to learn all of these processes. That's been a challenge throughout the whole thing. I think the first years we were a little stricter on our developers and contractors, and we've kind of loosened up a little bit. And that's just been learning as more guidance has come out, like what what can we do, and then they've also gotten more comfortable with what we're requesting.
Thank you so much. All right, we're going to move forward to the fourth and final question for our panel today. Um, what qualitative efforts does your organization undertake, and how have partnerships contributed to the effectiveness of these efforts? I know we spoke a little bit about this earlier, but diving back in and seeing if you can provide a little bit more information. What qualitative efforts does your organization undertake, and how have partnerships contributed to the effectiveness of these efforts? So starting with Laura, and then going to Patricia. Um, or Heidi, rather, Laura and then Heidi. Thank you.
Okay, so IHFA themselves. So I have on my website, and you may look at that later. Actually, specifically when the opportunity portal kind of went down, we were looking at how can we also aid our partners in getting information out there and giving them kind of a landing page to push out, here's what's kind of going on in our partnerships with them. And so on our website, I have a job opportunities, and we will from time to time post up and coming projects and give our developers an opportunity to kind of put out a page that says, we're doing this, we're in this area, and come and find us if you're looking for work. Um, so that's kind of on our part. And then qualitative efforts is focused primarily on training, having those conversations early, early and often. When they apply, when we go to give them funding awards, conversations about what they turn in on their developer plan. Like if they say we're going to do this or this, maybe having a conversation. Well, we'd really like you to also try this, or can we not just do one or two things? Can we expand what qualitative efforts looks like so that you can reach more people? So we have a better. I think I'm going to stop and also say we understand very few of our projects we're going to meet benchmarks. It's really difficult to find um, workers uh, in general. Labor has been really difficult. And so understanding that from the get-go, we're probably going to have to rely on qualitative efforts as our means to kind of communicate to HUD on what we've been doing. And so having that training, the conversation, collecting the documentation up front, that has been our goal throughout this is, getting that understanding of what this is and then collecting that documentation And like I said, again, you can't go backwards. You cannot go back to when it was just dirt on the on the street and say, hey, you know, we've now done outreach to find low-income workers or Section 3 workers in the area. The project's built and we have no labor hours to give them, but you know, now we're going to go do outreach. It doesn't work that way. Um, so starting it early and expressing that it has to be early, and then like Patricia said, some of our projects take 2 years. So just because they got hired up front and you collected your paperwork up front on those early efforts doesn't mean that as opportunities come out throughout the project site, maybe you switch contractors. So, you know, helping our developers and our general contractors understand that if they have to switch to a new contractor mid-project, that they need to do those qualitative efforts again. They need to do that outreach again to help fill those positions as best they can.
Thank you. Heidi?
So again, we're focusing on best effort approach. So we just so far have focused on just simple things. As I mentioned earlier, we include information about Section 3 in all of our quarterly newsletters. We have information about Section 3 posted in our main office. We also include Section 3 information in our request for proposals and bid packets. When we meet with contractors, we educate them about Section 3. And just a quick partnership, we've got contacts at the Department of Labor. So when we do have residents that have expressed interest in needing assistance with resumes or job search or job training, we're able to direct them and refer them out to our local Department of Labor to assist them with those things.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. So now if I could have all three panelists back on, I have just a few more questions here. If you could provide one word of advice for organizations just trying to figure out implementation of Section 3, what would it be? And I want to start with Patricia, and then Heidi, and then Laura.
I would say having documents and forms. You wanted to make it as easy as possible for your stakeholders to respond to what you're requesting. But if you have the tools for them to respond, it would make it easier for them, which would make it easier for you.
Absolutely, thank you.
I would say brainstorm with your staff, especially if you're a small agency. They might help generate ideas, or they might have simple ways that you can show a best effort or something they can implement easily without having to agonize over what to do. It could be just something simple.
Thank you. And Laura?
I could literally mirror Patricia. It's having forms available and trying to make this as easy as possible for them to understand what's required and what we need to all be successful at this.
Wonderful. Thank you all so much. This has been a really great conversation, and I appreciate you being here and sharing your insights as people who are doing this and doing it well. If we can move forward to the next slide, here are some resources that we hope will help everyone on their Section 3 journey. We have talked about this a lot of times, but Laura's agency, Idaho Housing Finance Administration, I think, or Authority.
Association.
I apologize. IFHA. This is the link to their resources, and I think Tara is going to put that into the chat now so you can grab it. Lots of really phenomenal resources there. That takes you directly to that Section 3 page, and you can see the examples of so much that Laura has talked about today. And maybe it will help you to not recreate the wheel, to kind of have some of those at your fingertips. Also, there's Section 3 guidance on HUD.gov, of course, and so we point you to that. And then Section 3 resources on the HUD Exchange, and there's lots of, again, there are webinars, there are office hours where people ask questions, similar to a lot of the questions that were asked today. There are forms, sample forms and templates that you can use there. So hopefully that provides a lot of resources for everyone. If you have technical Section 3 questions, there's the Ask a Question desk. So you can submit your question through that AAQ portal, and someone will respond with an answer to your question, or respond and ask you for a little bit more information so that we can answer your question. For more in-depth technical assistance, you can request that in-depth program assistance for your organization, there at the bottom link here, at the HUD Exchange program info, program support, technical assistance. And I think those are all being placed in the chat so that you can grab those. And so we encourage you to utilize the resources that are here. Definitely ask more questions if you need it, and request in-depth assistance if you need that. Next slide, please. Okay, we have more webinars coming out. Unlocking your Section 3 potential tomorrow, a little bit different time, 2:30 to 4 p.m. Eastern time. We have Power in Partnerships, and we're going to hear from some people and the partners that they work with on Section 3, and hear a little bit about workforce development there, and how that whole universe can be good partners, as you build and administer your Section 3 programs. Then on December 10th from 1 to 2:30 p.m. Eastern time, we have effective strategies for Section 3 procurement and contractor management. We know that's a big topic, and folks will have lots of questions there. And then next week, December 11th, again from 1 p.m. to 2:30 p.m. Eastern time, we have intentional and impactful multicultural outreach and gender inclusion. So more about outreach and that really intentional, impactful, important multicultural and gender outreach there for you as well. So with that, we'll move to the next slide, and just want to say thank you to everybody for participating. Thank you for your questions, and we hope to see you at an upcoming session. Have a great day, everybody.